Insteads isn't a word. Of memorizing facts and concepts, and insteads place, oh my gosh, insteads isn't a word. Education. It's one of those topics that everybody has an opinion on. Ask people what their schooling was like, and literally everyone in the industrialized world will give you an answer. Sometimes they'll look back on their childhood staple with fondness, and other times they'll look back with negative projections of tiny desks and small confines. Science education, though, is one of those fields in a person's schooling that doesn't seem to get a lot of attention. Standardized tests for math and reading seem to be the priority at most schools, while science, by virtue of being harder to assess and more expensive, tends to get pushed by the wayside. In America, the scientific standards for education got a makeover recently, but it took about a decade to do so, and in the scope of scientific and technological advancement, 10 years is a long time. Luckily, these new standards are a pretty awesome upgrade from the old standards. They're called the New Generation Science Standards, or NGSS as I'll be calling them in this video. NGSS was developed by a team of scientists and science educators in response to such a rapid change in science and technology in the 21st century. Science was, and still is, advancing so quickly that by the time a textbook was published, the information was already outdated. And why fill a student's brain with knowledge if it's going to be worthless by the time they get out there and get jobs? Something about science education had to change in order to meet the intellectual needs of the modern scientific climate. NGSS was formally introduced in 2013, with a few states quickly picking it up. My home state of California decided to pick it up in 2013, with Oregon and Nevada following closely behind in 2014. Since then, a total of 18 states have decided to adopt the new standards. And whether by coincidence or demand, states like Louisiana and South Dakota have updated their standards to new science standards also. It's not NGSS, but the fact that they're updating their standards from the old school ones is a pretty big win. Despite the initial hype and excitement, integration of the new standards is going slower than expected. Most states were expected to sign on within about 1 to 2 years, but that's not happening. So why isn't it? Education, like anything in life, is dictated by money and is subject to all the frustrating politics that come along with it. Unlike the old Common Core standards, there's no financial incentive for a school to adopt NGSS. Just the opposite. It's going to take money to buy the textbooks and utilize any new technology that they previously wouldn't have. Now, I'm personally in strong favor of the new NGSS standards, but I understand that if you're a school who has the decision to make between either making sure the electricity bill gets paid or buying textbooks for a new set of science standards that you're not federally required to follow, then you're not going to do it. Luckily, American public schools are getting so much funding these days, there's no such thing as budget crunches, right? Semi-political angry rant aside, the new standards are quite a bit different than the old standards, and that's what this video is about. In general, NGSS moves science education away from the old view of memorizing facts and concepts, and instead focuses on a more comprehensive behavioral view of science education. The NGSS framework is broken up into 3 parts, or what they're calling the 3-dimensional approach to the new standards. The 3-dimensional approach includes practices, core ideas, and cross-cutting, and I'll explain what each one of those means. In a previous video, I talked about why I'm such a huge fan of the scientific method, which is still a useful process in the new science standards. In the past standards, there was a bigger emphasis on scientific inquiry, or asking questions with the purpose of discovering information. Think about experiments you did in elementary school. They probably felt more like playtime or a guided activity at best. You weren't really discovering anything new, you were just demonstrating something you already knew the answer to. This changes quite a bit with NGSS. The emphasis on scientific and engineering practices forces students to discover and explain why things work. Students are encouraged to ask questions and behave like scientists. No longer will they be able to stare off into the distance and daydream about Minecraft or whatever kids daydream about. This encourages each kid to behave like a scientist and empowers them to discover their own information instead of just sitting down and making a teacher force knowledge into their heads. We give them the process and they can find any questions answer with it. Basically, we're telling kids to think like scientists, not like science students. The next dimension of NGSS is that a few core ideas permeate science education from kindergarten to 12th grade. This change is probably the most radical difference from the old standards and will probably be the most difficult thing for schools to implement at a local level. The previous standards held that certain topics were more applicable for children to learn at certain stages in their development. Here in California, our old standards said that children should learn a few general concepts every year in life, physical, and earth sciences, as well as a few new methods of experimentation and investigation. For example, in the old earth sciences category, 1st graders would learn about the weather, 4th graders would learn about the rock cycle, and 8th 8th graders would expand their knowledge of Earth's place in the galaxy. You wouldn't begin talking about stars until 2nd grade, even though children observe them every night in the night sky, and you wouldn't even begin talking about the human body until 5th grade. Placing hard and fast rules on when a child should learn a topic denies them the ability to ask questions and maintain the inquisitive curiosity that we want them all to have. The new standards eliminated this by outlining a few core ideas that teachers should expand upon from year to year while still aiming to be comprehensive. While we still divide the topics into physical, life, and earth sciences, teachers expand on the depth and complexity of each concept and each core idea across the years. For example, take Earth Sciences section 1.c, the history of planet Earth. A 1st grader would start out simple. They would learn that some processes on the Earth happen quickly, like earthquakes and volcanoes. By 4th grade, the complexity increases. They can tell us why certain landforms on Earth are useful in discovering what events happened in particular order along Earth's history. For instance, they would understand that if there's a river at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, that river probably helped shape the canyon by the process of erosion. A junior high student is expected to learn that different layers of rock and given fossil records can help us organize the relative time frame of major events in Earth's history. We don't find Stegosaurus fossils in the same rock strata as Tyrannosaurus fossils because they didn't live at the same time. High schoolers would meet this standard by explaining how tectonic plate activity and other geological processes give evidence towards the Earth's age and other major events in Earth's history. This dimension of NGSS allows a 1st grader to explain a phenomena to the best of their abilities and to learn more about it as they get older. They no longer have to wait until 4th grade to play with rocks or wait until 5th grade to wonder why it rains. They start out with a core idea and deepen its complexity over the next 12 years of school. The final dimension of NGSS is the idea of cross-cutting concepts, or the idea that certain skills are necessary at all grade levels across all subjects of scientific learning. What's awesome is that none of these skills are based off of memorization. They're based off of the application of certain skills. At all times, students should be able to do the following. They should be able to recognize patterns and see that commonalities between characteristics or traits give us ways to classify them based off of their influences or relationship. They should understand cause and effect. Every phenomena has a mechanism behind it that makes it work. By doing this, they're able to test if-then scenarios really young to explain the root causes behind something. They need to understand scale, proportion, and quantity. Putting size and scale into perspective is really difficult to do when you're young. This concept tries to train students to think in proper time, size, energy, and other measurement scales. The next 4 concepts are all pretty closely related. Although they are all unique, they all use each other to make for a more complete view of a system model. They need to be able to conceptualize systems and system models. They need to be able to identify a system, put borders on it, and be able to study it. This allows us to more accurately study the exact phenomena that we're interested in through modeling and observation. Students need to know that energy and matter flow, go through cycles, and are governed by laws of conservation. It's about time. Every single phenomena from meteorology to the rock cycle to the human body uses the laws of conservation of energy and matter at some point during its study. I'm glad that energy and matter got categorized as a cross-cutting concept and decompartmentalized from a grade-specific topic like before. They need to understand that structure and function are highly related. That's easy enough. The function of a living or non-living thing is usually dictated by what it looks like or what it's made out of. For example, the structure of a shark is made up of a sleek body, powerful muscles, and sharp teeth. It would make sense that its function is that of an underwater predator and not building dams in a forest like a beaver does. Finally, the last cross-cutting concept is that of stability and change. In the past, we would show snapshots of homeostatic systems as just how it is. Students should know that both natural and man-made systems have periods of stability, but also periods of change. So to summarize, the new generation science standards are quite a bit different than the old standards. If your home state hasn't adopted NGSS yet, hopefully they're at least updating and improving their standards so they can provide students with the best preparation possible for the real world. Now, what do you think? Are you a fan or not of these new standards? If you're a teacher, let me know any stories of success or challenges that you've had trying to implement the new standards. Let me know in the comments below. For now, have fun, be good, and I'll see you next time.